Test, test, test. All right, we're about 6 minutes in before class. Admit. Sweet. How are you today?
I'm good.
Excellent. I know you'd sent me an email. I'm behind on emails, but you're on
Oh,
my
you're fine. I totally understand.
you're on my queue for today, actually. I'm just finished up with my graduate criminological theory I was working on, and now I'm gonna be switching over to you all later today. So hoping everything goes. And so everything seems to go pretty good so far this week, but it's Monday, so
Right.
we'll wait and see what kinds of how long it takes everybody to roll in here today. I know we're gonna have one person out because they had jury duty, so that'll be
Oh, interesting.
yeah. Well, that's one of those things that's it's if you're in this field very long at all, your opportunities to do that kind of start disappearing. So it's like if you get that opportunity, take it. Like definitely take it. So very cool stuff. We're gonna be in psychological stuff today, so let me pull out my notes because I don't remember what all I wanted to talk to you about. I know there are a few different facets that will come up in a few different ways. Here,
It's totally irrelevant, but I noticed on the syllabus that you're a fan of target shooting.
yes, it's been probably 3 or 4 years since I've gotten to them. But oh, I used to go probably about whenever I was in Arkansas, I lived probably about 20 minutes from the outside range. So I'd get to go probably 2, 3 times a week, and I was hand
Oh,
loading.
nice.
Yeah, so I got to shoot a lot. And it was a lot of fun. It's just time now.
Yeah,
Great skill
it
to have.
pretty it pretty much is a guaranteed afternoon gone. And if like to really go and have a good time, ammo's so expensive anymore. You're spending at least 150, $200 to have just a solid shoot.
Yeah.
And that's like one person.
And that's one of the reasons why I stopped. It got one was time, the other was expense. I was hand loading. My favorite run's actually 357 because it's just so flat. Um,
Nice.
yeah, but back then, and that's probably like 5, 6 years ago, it was like $1.25 a shot. But if you hand, yeah, it was like if you hand loaded, it was only like 10 cents. So I did a whole bunch of that, and then that started to get expensive too because you don't save money, you just shoot more.
Right.
And so then I got wrapped up in research stuff. I just haven't had any free time until probably this summer, maybe. I don't know. We'll have to see how that goes. But in terms of skills, it's like that's one that at some point within like undergraduate and graduate degrees, at some point we need to figure out a way to get the student body exposed to that more because that's one of those skills that one, it's a perishable skill, so it's good to have some exposure with that because people they aren't aware that a lot of their skills are perishable because they keep using them. That's one.
Mhm.
One time you'll develop it a little bit and be like, okay, you'll either use it and keep refining it, or you'll come back like a year later and realize, oh, I'm right back where I was. I'm like, yeah, that's how that goes. Plus, it's life. That's how you protect lives.
Yes. I know that there's a pistol 1 and 2 course offered, but I don't think there's an opportunity to rent a handgun to go through the course. I think you have to provide your own. And I
Ooh.
think there's like a basic rifle marksmanship course, but a lot of students don't know that it's offered. It's just I don't think it's even a credit, or if
Yeah,
it is, it's 1 credit hour.
yeah.
But it's
That reminds me, so there was a guy I talked with, this has probably been about 2 years ago now. I've not had time to revisit, but it is on my mind. He's a professor here. I want to say he was retired. His last name was Salmon. And he was one of the ones who was running some of the classes we have here, but they were some of that like was it not secondary credit, not extended. There's a specific phrase for it because it wasn't something that wouldn't necessarily count for credit, but it's still like, if you have that experience, like everybody needs that to some degree, particularly if they're building and stuff in here. It's one of those things that the utility of it can't be understated, and you don't really see it until you start playing with the ideas. My favorite one I ever ran into was it was a friend of mine, and they were talking about they've done a study on firearms, use of force, that kind of stuff, and
Mhm.
their big proposition, their big thing that they'd not implication, but thing that they'd like offered to help fix it was, something to the akin of, it's not that we need to have more guns out in society. What we need to have is we need to have more people who look like they're carrying guns, so people can't tell who's really carrying a gun and who isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I can kind of see the logic in that, but at the same time, if you're doing this from that functional perspective and you've ever actually handled one of those, you know that if someone sees that you have one, even if it's a fake one, you're the first target and now you have no defense whatsoever. So what you did is you massively inflated the likelihood that you will be the specific target first. It's like, that's how that works, not that other thing. It's like that other thing might work if everybody got on board. What's going to happen first is that's going to be you, you're going to be the victim. And as
And
soon as, yeah.
it's totally situational too. Like I carry myself, I carry a 1911 chambered in
Oh,
45, so it's pretty big,
my
and
favorite.
it's fairly difficult to conceal sometimes without wearing like a big coat or like a big flannel. But there are certain circumstances where I think it's fairly advantageous to open carry, like when I go fishing, for instance, and like
Oh, yeah.
I'm out by myself, I don't know if there's going to be I'm in the woods, there could be feral dogs, there could be
Yeah. Oh,
coyotes.
well, I mean, and that's the whole thing is that you see the actual value of the weapon itself, and some people don't, but the damnedest thing for me isn't it's part of what you're hitting on there, but it's how I started trying to explain it anytime I bring it up, it's from an evolutionary biology perspective, they call it convergent evolution. It's when you see a bee, right? You see that bright yellow, the stripes kind of thing, a hornet, the bright coloring. Those things,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some flies will have those same colorings. They use that as a way to kind of get that protection that the bee has. Given the choice, I'd rather be the bee with the stinger than the fly that's just going to get crushed. And it's like that's the thing. And and
Agreed.
and so like that's why it's like, the open carrying, all for. Concealed carrying, I like that better. The
I
open
like that better too, 99% of the time.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But the open carrying of something that looks like a firearm that isn't as a way to get protection, it's like, yeah, no, that's wrapping yourself in like paper armor. You're gonna get shot, and if it's not very,
Yeah.
it's like, ugh. But that's kind of rants on that stuff for now. Wait to see if anybody shows up here in person. We got 3 online. I've got at least one person who typically shows up here in person. So I'll give her about 5 more minutes, and then we'll start rolling off into the psych stuff. We're gonna be talking about. So last time we talked about. Before we got in the psych stuff there, I forget what they were talking about. We're gonna be moving into a little bit about this guy, and we'll talk a little bit, if I spelled that correctly. A bit about how psychology is developed and its overlaps with our field. So one of the best things about our field is we can literally pull from almost anywhere. This field is pretty unique in that like you have all of the, what would you say? Sociology. You have poli-sci, political science, because that's government stuff. You have some degree biology. We've already talked about some of that stuff, or psychology. And basically what you start getting is these two are going to be closer related. We're a direct spinoff from sociology. Psychology is typically you're dealing with individuals, individual level. Anytime you start getting here, you're dealing with aggregates of people. Biology stuff, you start getting an idea for, I don't want to say like philosophical tabula rasa type of thing. If you're taking philosophy, if I said tabula rasa, blank slate, the idea that we start out as blank slates, yeah, no, we don't at all. And that's kind of what this starts getting at. And so it's identifying to what degree this takes influence. But all these things are going to be running all at the same time for any one person. So anytime we study, we pick one perspective that we're going to focus in on. This is one that gets a lot of attention. One, because it's its own field, but it's also what people most think of when they think about crime. They think about people individually. They don't think about the aggregates of it or pulling things out from an abstract level. They think I'm dealing with it directly. And and there's more fields than this you can go into, because I mean you also have business. Business is a big one because business is going to be how you kind of operate most of your political stuff, your government stuff, if you're doing it right. Efficient businesses run, bad businesses die. From the political world, you kind of have the same kind of thing. It's just a different time scale, I guess. I don't know. That's just kind of a thought to keep running underneath. So we're going to be dealing with psych, the individual stuff, and then we'll start talking about how that works. Important caveat: if you're going to do you know, the theories that are related to like any of these subsets kind of thing. Have fun, but also be aware that there are some differences in how we do it within our field versus if you jump over to psych and do it. And I'll point that out because some of the stuff that they'll talk about in this section will have to do with learning. And then they'll have a section where they talk about learning. And then if you actually delve into the actual learning theorists in our field, they do things a little bit different. But I think that's enough framing of that to get off into it. So, in terms of Freud, what do you really need to know about him? Early leader in psychology, his importance there one of those things again, can't be understated. Also, realize you're bound with the times and the knowledge they had available. So this is a lot of thought for people trying to figure out how people work. And so some of it's, what would you say, introspective, I want to say. Most of it's introspective is where it comes from. It's not going to be like the research that we do that generates theory. It's going to be the process of the mind and the logic there to some degree. I should probably talk a little bit about logic real quick because it's been on my mind again because I was grading some stuff. Logic and reasoning are some of the most important facets that you have. You use them all the time, but people don't always put them together the same way. And sometimes you get different things if you do that. Theory is an area where I can show that quite literally at times where you can see, I can pull out different information just with subtle tricks kind of thing, not tricks, just math. But here, that's not the process they went through. It was more logic. It's, you know, reasoning through whatever problem, whatever things that they're seeing, and try to understand what's going on there. And I can kind of point that out, like, I can't remember if it was Freud or not, but if you take oral fixations, whether you're talking about oral fixations, whether you're talking about anal retentive people, you know, the ones who are obsessively clean, you know, they can't handle you know, anything that's dirty. Everything's got to be fit, you know, very, very specific. And if you deviate from what they have identified as clean, they'll let you know, kind of thing. Anal retentive, anal expulsive would be the opposite. People are real messy, that kind of thing. What they do here, what he did, is he tried to link that through to some degree, the developmental processes involved with the mind as one ages. Basically, what he would tie it into is your oral routes are one of the first, you know, ways you interact with the world. Everything goes in the mouth when you're a kid, and that's kind of a framing device for how we start to interpret the world. The anal retentive, anal expulsive, that's actually going to tie into some of the first things that kids actually control, that are their bodily movements, kind of thing, your bowel movements and that kind of stuff. First areas you get some control over if there's going to be some issues with the processes that are, you know, whether it's experience or just something associated with causing problems with those processes and how it develops. It starts there is kind of what he gets at. But that's some of the stuff that he did. This book focuses more on the id, ego, and superego. And so, keep in mind, we're not following the same kind of scientific method that you'd find in like our methods class and how we generate theory now. That's been the biggest advance in humanity, probably more, well, I'd say definitely more important than computers within the last couple 100 years that we started using this across many things. That's a methods discussion. You take methods. We'll talk about that, that kind of thing. So you got these three elements: the id, the ego, and the superego. So basically what it is you've probably seen, if you've had psychology, maybe they usually tend to show it as like an iceberg, where it's like, okay, you've got this little bit that pops out of the surface, everything that's down below, and then you've got this part that governs it. And that's sort of what they try to identify as the id, the ego, and superego. The id is your subconscious. It's the part of you that's more base, more primal, the part of you that likes instant gratification. Your ego is the part of you that tries to reconcile that, and the superego is you as you've integrated them, and that's how you kind of make you as you. That's kind of how Freud did it. And as you follow him, his students, the ideas, they take a little bit different tracks kind of thing. It's the same type of thing that you see with us in theory, is that, you know, in one area, you might have an idea take root. Someone else is going to take that idea and move it in different directions, that kind of thing. For example, the book probably didn't tell you much about, Freud. If you've taken this class, you probably heard this name before. From him directly, one of his students would be Jung. There's a whole bunch there, but Jung's the guy. If you ever heard the word archetypes, that's your guy. That's the one where basically what he does is he starts identifying how people interact with archetypes. Similar idea, we start talking about symbols in our field. Psychology has some stuff like that you might tie into as well. It's like, so you get to see a little bit how some of these areas can integrate. Archetypes, really cool stuff. In terms of Freud, he did it this way. Jung deals with the same thing if you really delve into it. And what he'll do is he'll relate it through a few different things. He does, what is it? I think it's like anima, animus. I can't remember what all of them are, but it's like shadow. So anima is your female side, anima is your male side. Everybody has both. Your shadow is everything you don't want to see. Here's your analogy there. And then you have the element of you that's essentially, I wrote face there because it's like that face fronting part of you. The image of yourself you present to the world as you understand it. Start getting closer to what that concept was to some degree. But there's nuance there. And you can see how one person develops it. One person talks about the same thing, does it a little bit differently. But there's a whole bunch of stuff within this field that you can tie off into. From here, they talk about psychodynamics was Freud, the id, the ego, and the superego. From there, they don't talk about this. They also don't talk about Piaget. I want to say Piaget was play. I like Piaget. I want to say that his was the one of the biggest ones he had done was he had studied playing mice. Through the 3-to-1 rule for play. It's a good advice. This is just general advice to help you with things. If you ever have to give someone something bad, it's like for every bad thing you say 3 good things, right? For every interaction you have with, let's say you're playing a game, I'm gonna wrestle with one of my kids. It's like, I'm this big, they're this big. I'm gonna win 3 times, I'll let them win once. If I win every single time, they'll stop playing. If they win every time, they'll know I'm not actually trying, they'll stop playing. And so there's engagement there, that kind of thing. So there's all kinds of stuff you can tie into in these fields too. Let's see, so that's that. And I'm sure I'm forgetting because I want to say he had 5 elements, but I don't remember. All right, so that's a bit about Freud. Next, the textbook kind of jumps back into areas that are a little bit closer to what we do. And so I start doing some of the social attachment stuff. And so here it goes into, oh, I shouldn't say attachment, I should say attachment theory. Get rid of the social. Attachment theory. In ours, you'll call it social bonds, social attachment, same kinds of things. It's just different terminology. So you have to be very, very careful to make sure you cite everything if you write on this stuff. But attachment theory, basically start dealing with are the social bonds. It'll tell you about emotional bonding in infancy. Basically, as you're going through those developmental processes, you'll attach to those that are in your circle, so your family. Use those for modeling, and that's how you start to learn how to integrate with the world. We in our field, we have our own sets of bonds and attachment theories that are going to be based off similar to this, not based off it directly, but they'll do different things. If bonding is something that you're interested in, let me know because there's stuff I can send you on that. Let's see. So social learning theory moves into attachment theory and then talks about social learning. So how we learn is one of the big aspects of whether it's a psychological side or just being in class. I don't know. What time is it? 11 or 1:15? Okay, we got good time. Good. Okay. So social learning. There's a few aspects we want to talk about in terms of the social side. That's going to be tight here. Right? You're going to pick up things from those that you're attached to most. Not that that's the only people you pick up things from, but this is where you're most likely to pick up behaviors from people, right? So here in the book, it talks about learned observations. So you see it, you repeat it at some point, and you do it. That mentions direct versus indirect. Basically, are you seeing it firsthand or not? That kind of thing. Is it something you're hearing about, something you're learning about? Is it something, the distance between the people that you're dealing with might be part of it too. Basically, what you start dealing with here is, okay, you are born, your parents are criminal. As you are watching them interact in the world, you learn more about how they interact with the world. And then you start modeling those behaviors, maybe. The book will talk a little bit about how we make those distinctions in terms of what behaviors manifest. Basically, it's part of that logic thing that's going to be underlying who's ever actually learning. They're going to see what they see, they're going to see what it does to the best degree that they can. So you got some boundaries there. But it is a learned type of thing. There's two perspectives to talk about when we start talking about learning things. There's the likelihood that a behavior will get transmitted. That's to some degree, you're probably talking about frequency kind of thing, how close those relationships are, how often you see it, that kind of stuff. To some degree, you're also talking about the transmission itself, like you see this criminal behavior, how far can it spread, right? And so think about it this way, the nature of the relationships are actually what's going to dictate that spread. The closer that relationship, that spread's going to be more likely, but it won't go as far. Whereas if it's a behavior that you're demonstrating to someone who you don't have as close ties to, the likelihood that they pick it up, if they pick it up, they have the ability to spread it even farther. That's how that works. It has to do with some of that social ties kind of thing, strength of strong ties, the strength of weak ties, and the weaknesses of both. All right. So, learned observations, either direct or indirect. Indirect would be, they give you media as an example, but I'm just going to tell you anything you hear about that you're not actively seeing, because that's indirect. Like mass media, you might see it, but you're not really seeing it. It also talks about the role of punishment and rewards, but that is itself its own discussion. So we'll get to that in a minute. Hold off on that, because that's how they determine whether or not that behavior manifests. What's the likelihood I get these kinds of things? To some degree. Okay. In terms of the people they cite in this textbook, I'm less familiar. I'm more familiar with the ones that are directly in our field. First one that's really going to tie into social learning. You may recognize this name. This guy by this name. Sutherland. He is a big name in our field. His theory is called differential association. Basic premise of that is, if I want to determine how likely it is that criminal behavior manifests, all I need to do is look at your peer network and identify how closely or how many people you have friends that have definitions of crime or definitions of behavior that fall into criminal. You as a group find these classes of behavior acceptable, whereas everyone else in society says that these are illegal, whether it's fighting, drugs, violence is always on the mind. But you have other types of crimes too. But typically we see like rings and things like that, where you have a community kind of thing. The closer net your tie is to them, the more likelihood it's that same thing I was just talking about. Differential. There is a difference here. And if we look at those differences between how many people you have on one side versus how many people you got on the other side, it's almost like that old phrase about the two wolves tearing at you. Which one wins is whichever one you feed, and you do that with your friends too. That's kind of what he's talking about here. More wordy, more beautiful in the way that they write about it, but same concept. Okay. Behavioral, but I want to talk about violence in media and the role of violence. We do need to talk about violence. I don't know if we're ready to talk about that one yet, because within this field, that's something that's you have to know that to some degree it is acceptable within society, and not just acceptable, necessary in some instances. And that's a scary conversation. Let's see, behavior modeling, you look at family interactions, the environment, mass media. Let's see. Events and arousal, talking about aggressive skills learned, expected outcome. Okay, there we go. So what will happen is that in this process that they're learning, they'll see events take place. And whether it's, the behavior that they see, whether it's aggressive or whatever, they'll see it manifest, they'll see what happens as a result, and that increases the likelihood that it'll either happen or it won't. In either way, though, no matter whether you have this one or this one, guess what? You're still gonna have this right here. So that behavior is still transmitted, even if it's not displayed. That's one of the more interesting things about learning itself. It's really easy to learn something. There is almost no forgetting it. Yeah. So they'll see that, they'll have this process, they'll have expected outcomes. And then as they do that, they'll take actions that are consistent with that belief. They use a phrase in here, scripts, that's what it was, mental scripts. You'll run into that phrase in a few different theories if you really get off into it. Here what it is mental scripts. They're talking about that whole process. Oh, I've seen something like this go down before. This person did this person did this next action did this, and that got to the goal that I think is consistent with whatever I need to do to get it, that kind of thing. You see this all the time. You can see it in scripts. You'll also see them in some of the gang research that's done in our field where I can see those interactions, those things like what's the word before? Esteem, not esteem. When you're dealing that with between other people, how you view me and how I view you. If I view something you've done as insulting to me, what action do I feel justified in taking? In some groups, that includes death. That kind of thing. Gang behaviors, basically we start dealing with there to some degree. All right. Don't want to talk about violence yet. We want to talk about this, then we need to talk about the cognitive side. So I think we'll talk about Skinner first. Okay, so how many of you are familiar with Skinner? If I said the name B.F. Skinner, you know who I'm talking about. I'm not hearing anybody. I'm not seeing. All right. So we'll do this. We'll talk about him. Skinner is one of the most influential people in psychology, in behaviorism, in learning, to some large degree, to a very, very large degree. Skinner, where he'll come in, is Skinner. They'll call it behaviorism, that kind of thing. Really, what you're talking about is this called here, operant conditioning. You've ever seen a depiction where I have a mouse in a box. I put this mouse in there. It'll go over here and press this button to get food. It'll feed itself, right? How we got to the point where we can get that mouse to do that, it's this operant condition. I'm going to teach you how to do something, and how you do it is you have to shape that behavior the whole way. Tell you in terms of this, because this is one that is more important than you realize, because you can use it everywhere. And if you start using this when you're dealing with people in a positive way, you can see it, everything around you will grow. So we'll start out with the end, reward and punishment. Okay. A behavior is seen. When a behavior is seen, to some degree, people will reward or punish it, right? Rewards and punishments, they come in both positive and negative. Because most people see the word punishment, they think negative. They see the word reward, they think positive. It's like, yeah, I mean, a reward is a good thing, a punishment is a bad thing. But we're talking about its direction, right? I gave, I take. I gave, I take, right? I can give you a reward, or I can take something as a reward. Hey, you're suffering. Let me ease that burden a little bit. That's a reward, right? Hey, you did something I don't like. Let me give you something you really don't want. There you go. I gave you something. That's a punishment, right? Oh, I didn't like how you acted today. Yeah, you might be in a cell today, but today we're gonna have a little extra fun. Since you already had the cell and you've done something extra, I'm gonna take the toilet seat off. Have fun, right? I took something away to punish you. Right? And as you do that, people, animals themselves, whether or not they're actively counting and thinking about it, they do track that. And you can teach anything really. Here's how you do it. Okay. Got rewards and punishments. So we have some type of target behavior. Target behavior. We want to see that. Anytime I see anything that starts to approximate it, I reward it. So the mouse in the box, it's every time he starts walking towards that lever. I'm gonna drop a piece of food. We didn't talk about motivation when we talked about routine or was rational choice. We talked about it a little bit. This one, the motivation's hunger, right? That's what they do with animals. You can do it with people too. It doesn't have to be hunger, it can be other things. Hunger works too. That's what we use on prisoners of war. So reward. As I get closer and closer to it, that reward keeps coming. Keep doing the same thing, you keep staying in the same area, I'm not seeing progress, that reward kind of tapers off, and then you have to do something new to figure out where that reward's at, right? And as you do that, you start moving. And once you figure it out that lever is what drops the food, and you'll press it every time. You know, that's what's going on in terms of that mouse is difference, right? That shaping. As that person takes incremental steps towards the thing that you want to see, you reward that. You either don't reward a punish, see steps away. Punishment doesn't work because punishment, there's a few things that it doesn't do. Okay, you're gonna punish someone, they're not gonna forget what they learned, right? They'll just learn not to do it in your presence, which also means that when you're gone, that behavior will come right back. Not only will it come right back, now that you're not there, that punishment is gone. That is its own reward. It's like you literally just reinforce that whole cycle. And as it's starting to seem like we're talking about crime and policing here again, yeah, this is why it's always going to be a struggle. With this, like this will get you to wherever you want to go. You keep shaping it so you get that behavior, and eventually they'll figure it out. There's actually schedules that go along with this. Like, you know, like a 1-to-1 or a 5-to-1. Like for every say they figure out how to press the button. Every time they press the button, they get one element, one little bit of food, right? Every 5 times they press the button, they'll get one bit of food, right? Every 6 times, what you see is a straight line kind of thing. The more number of times it takes, the more you will see that behavior. It's really interesting is if you go gambling, you go random. And so this time it's going to be 1, next time it's going to be 5. The time after that's going to be 150-to-1. What you'll see is a line that looks like this, right? You start out with a low number, and as that person starts thinking they're getting closer, start thinking they're getting closer, the next one's going to win. Now, your odds never change. You're fooling yourself. That's why gambling is really addictive. It's a principle of learning that they're using. You use it in your ways for the things that you need, and guess what? The behavior you're trying to get, you will see as you're teaching, whatever you're teaching, that kind of thing. Now, extinction doesn't happen. Like I said, once you've learned something, that thing is there forever. Whether you remember it or not, there's always that capacity for it to come back. So extinction, you do punishment enough to where you would get something called extinction. Spell it, extinction, right? Enough of these, and that behavior will no longer manifest. That's whenever they call it extinct. Like I said, any provocation whatsoever, or sometimes just the absence of that punishment, it comes right back. It comes right back. Okay, so that's a little bit about learning and how that works. So that's that process for how we teach individuals at the individual level, if you want to do it in a way that lasts consistently over time. other things we need to talk about, gotten that one squared away, would be the cognitive side. This is the process for how we do it. Let me move this over a little bit so you can see part of it. There we go, a little bit better. So this is kind of the process. You have rewards and punishments. You shape the behavior you want to get using both of these, whether it's positive or negative, and they'll get you eventually the right behaviors if you're following it in the right way. However, that's sort of how we work as it is. The underlying stuff for how we actually work that we don't realize is also interesting. We talk about subconscious stuff and those types of things in psych. I'm not so worried about that whenever I say that. I'm talking more about the cognitive side of how we actually process things. The book did pretty well at covering this. It talked about cognitive information processing and reasoning, affect decisions and behavior. Yes. Okay. So this cognitive is a little bit how our minds work and how we process stuff, not what we do to change. How we process things is not as straightforward as what you would think. This is one where, depending on what topic we're going into, I'll present a number of different things to really show you. It's like, yeah, the world isn't what you think it is, kind of. Okay, we'll just deal with it from the outset. We'll start with just memory, not even how things actually function, just how we process that kind of information that we're going to keep. What book did this? This is a good way to keep it in mind, though. So it starts out with your working memory. Working memory. Short term, long term. You can actually break it down more than this. Your working memory is that there's actually more, there's everything that actually exists in the world, right? There's the stuff that you actually pick up on and can process to some degree. There's the ability you can actually take it and remember it for a little bit, and then however much we can get to go and actually remember it from there on out is questionable, right? It really is. Your working memory is sort of like the stuff you keep your head actively that you're actively using. It's not so much that you're in this room, there's X number of people in the room, there are 30 chairs in the room, there's 2 computers, there's 3 screens. It's like there's all that stuff going on. You're not actively using any of that. I'm actually using a very small part of it, right? And then from there, there's a filter here, right? Everything in the world that you're seeing, but you're not paying attention to, the stuff you're actually paying attention to, the stuff you start remembering, right? Short and long-term memory, what they'll tell you is that's 7 plus or minus 2. 7 plus or minus 2, that's the number of things that people keep in their short-term memory on average. You can only hold about 7 things, plus or minus 2. So about 5 to 9 is what most people can hold in mind. Another way to keep that in mind is this is your phone number. This is why phone numbers, aside from area code, you're dealing with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 numbers, right? There are different ways to get around that. Some of the ways that they do that are things like chunking, things like that. If I give you 7 numbers, 3, 5, 7, 9. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. Right? Now there's 5 numbers there. Be any number here. How well can you remember them? If I add in 10 more numbers, you're gonna have more trouble remembering them. However, if I had a whole bunch of numbers here, instead of doing it this way, if I can start putting those together, we're now talking about 357, 910, and then whatever. It's like this is one number, this is one number, rather than these are the digits, right? And so just the way that we process it to some degree influences what we see. It's not so much that you see a TV here or a screen in front of you, it's that we have identified that it is that, and we're going to look at it in that way. That's part of this. We identify what it is. We're going to look at it a specific way. This is what actually gets in. Keep in mind there's a filter here and a filter here. And so once you get this stuff, we work real hard at it. We get over here to our long-term memory. We need to keep it for a while. Also be advised that every time you activate one of these memories, You access it, you change it. Because just the process of accessing that information has the ability to corrupt it. Just like a computer, guys. In some ways, we work a lot like that. And so all of those processes are going on at the same time as everything else. Figure that part out. To give you an example of how these things can affect you more than you realize, just take one of your sensory inputs. Easiest one's eyes, because we use them a lot. You've all had an experience where you've looked at an inverted image for a period of time. And when you look away, as soon as you look away, you see that color go to the colors it should have been. Because the way our eyes are set up is it's innate, that kind of thing. This is one of those systems. This is innate. You've got filters at every step. If you're not paying attention to those filters, you won't see what you miss, kind of thing. And then people play with that. And some it's like, show you that. If you want me to show you that. Let's see. Info processing, storing it, coding and retrieving information is what you're talking about here. How do you process information? How do you store it? And how do you retrieve it? And those are all things that you know, as people, there's flaws that can be there. Next up. Okay, personality. So another facet of psychology that comes into our field is where they'll focus on factors or facets of one's personality and its relationship to crime. That one seems relatively straightforward because it is. Start dealing with something like, we're going to deal with aggression and see its relation to violence. It's like, yeah, okay, there's going to be one. That kind of thing. But it's more than just that. You have all the facets of things like, we're going to look at specific things like aggression. But you have all the things associated with research in this field of psychology that's going to do with personality characteristics and ways that classify them. The book will talk about, what was it? Let's see. Introverts / extroverts. Is one of the personality things. One of the older ones. I want to say that the biggest one in psychology right now is considered the big five. And basically what it is it's that same thing that you've seen before, where it's like introversion, extroversion, openness, neuroticism. What else is there? That's all I can remember off the top of my head though. But basically what it is you've all seen those personality tests where they say, okay, you're an INFJ or whatever. It might be like feel, whatever. But that would be for this one. It's not gonna be the same thing. Right. And so what they key into are some of those aspects of that big five or other bits of research that are very, very similar. So you have to make sure that you know which one you're pulling from. Introversion versus extroversion, you already know what those are. You guys have plenty of experience with that. Openness, pretty straightforward. I'm trying to remember what the textbook definition of that was. I'll write that down. I know it when I see it now. Bit of a joke. Those personality traits, what they do is there are ways that we identify big facets of someone's personality, and then we can look at to see how that interacts with crime. For example, you know, an extrovert versus introvert. Which one of those is going to be more likely to commit a series of burglaries? And the person's getting out there. That kind of. Now, if I were talking about who's going to have that one type of incident that's a huge mass violence type of thing, it's like, well, it could be either. You probably not certainly know there, but who knows? You have to want to sit down and analyze that. There's a lot there. Let's see, big five. I want to talk about that. Okay, I need to talk about abnormal psych. Okay, so this isn't abnormal psych. This is just how you classify personalities. The range for abnormal psychology, what you probably want to look at are your diagnostics and statistics manuals, the DSM for abnormal psychology. Be aware that there are some positives and negatives with keeping up with the different iterations, the different versions of those. The last time I looked at it was like the DSM 3 or 4, I want to say. So it's been a couple versions back, and some of the things that changed I'm not so happy about. But that's opinion. That's not useful for you in this class. It's just kind of know that you might find things you don't like. But abnormal psychology, typically what they start doing is, if you're looking at the DSM, they'll outline the specific, problem where you're dealing with, say, personality versus behavioral. Those are the big splits there. Disorders. For each one of those, though, they'll identify, this is, these are the basic elements to identify this is a person, this is this specific personality disorder. This is, this specific behavioral issue. So I said, good one. It's both behavioral and personality. Ooh. OCD, not criminal, right? Obsessive compulsive disorder. You can have it as both a personality or behavioral thing. The difference, right? If you start delving into this stuff from a practical side, how you can tell the difference is, I want to say this without being mean. It almost sounds like me. Do they see it? Right? Is this a problem? Do you see this as a problem? Yes or no? Here will be more likely to be no. Here it's more likely to be yes. You start dealing with personality disorders. The disorder itself is an element of their personality. That's like asking you to tell me what the inside of your eyeball looks like. You're looking through it. You don't see it. That's this right here. Behavioral stuff, you'll have people who are a bit more aware of that because they'll recognize it. And that's just the initial split kind of thing. What else do I want to tell you about that? Basically, what you're talking about is crimes and product of abnormal psychology. Yeah, it'll outline a whole bunch of personality and behavioral disorders, and you can look at those and see what their relationship is with crime if you're studying stuff at the individual level. And that's where this stuff really comes in, is you're dealing individual level again. You're for the most part, you're doing individual level. You're not dealing with aggregates unless you deal with a very specific population that's already been put through a battery of tests or something like that. So that's kind of how that one works. After that, we need to talk about, let's see, it's psychopathic, antisocial disorders, mental disorders, and talk about that. I talk about political influence in more recent versions. That'd be talking about toxic masculinity and how that popped up into the DSM, stuff like that. I'm not a big fan of that. I don't like anything that identifies some characteristic of any people as flawed. That's not how we do that. But that's being nice. I'll stop saying that. That works me up. The next one I need to have with you is this one. IQ. That's a dangerous one. Is there a relationship between IQ and crime? Unknown. Here's what I will tell you though. If you study the IQ of certain populations, you will see that some are not the same as others. Right? So that's one of those things right here. It's like prison population IQ is quite a bit lower than the average IQ. Now, when we start talking crime, it's like, okay, maybe it is that this is crime is produced by this. Maybe it's that, or maybe it's just, okay, you got caught kind of things. There are arguments we had there and those things. But as we're talking about IQ, thresholds are probably a good thing to talk about. So we'll talk a little bit about the bell curve, because that's where literally created the bell curve. The research on this is what identifies this. Okay, this is your standard population, normally distributed population. In methods, this, and your straight line stuff. That's all you need to know. This is literally all we do. Basically what you're dealing with here is this is your population on whatever issue you're dealing with. This is your average or mean, and then you have standard deviations on either side. If you've not heard that term before, basically what I'm talking about is, okay, we have this as our center. And what we've done is, since this is a kind of a standard shape, is we've identified standardized measures that show us how different someone who's here is from here or here or here, right? And so that way we can make some of those relative comparisons. For IQ, that average tends to be 100. Your IQ is 100, you have an average IQ. One standard deviation is 15 points, 115 and 85. So right here is the bulk of your population. If you're above 180 or 100, you're smarter than half of the population. If you're below, you're not as smart as half the population, or that kind of thing. What's interesting is that, like I said, with prison populations, you'll see that they skew this way. But you got a whole bunch of intervening factors that are there, but I'll talk about this number for a second. Okay. This is that low threshold. This is one where there's a lot of military stuff going on, so it's probably good to talk about that to give you an idea for how things shape up if, you know, things ever get rough. If you have an IQ that's, was it 83 or 84? Basically right here, most military will not take you. Meaning that at this point in time, those people are so difficult to train, and in terms of just the logistics that the military did them not to figure out at this point, it's easier not to have you there at all. That's one of those things where people talk about war and that phrase of if you know, you run, you fight, you do not give up, that kind of thing. Or, you know, like here's what that threshold is for intelligence, is if you're below that, you're not getting involved in that kind of thing. Realize that that's about 15% of the population, right? This is 50. This is about, would that be 85%? This would be the remaining 15, right? So if you have an IQ above 130, that means you're in the top 15% of the planet, or on average, whatever that area is that follows this curve. That's how intelligence works to some degree. Be aware that anytime you're dealing with averages, you're dealing with this whole thing, not just that one individual person. That's why we split it off into the individuals theories versus the aggregate stuff. Because, you know, people who are here and here, yeah, they're different. People here are different. But whenever you deal with populations, what you'll see is, okay, this thing is our males for whatever, and maybe this thing is our females, or something like that. Basically, what you see is, okay, maybe there are some differences here. Maybe it's the shape, so if you fall in this range, there are bigger differences here. Or maybe it's that there's a slight change in these two things. And so what you end up with is a very small change, but what you really look at is, over here's where you see the big change. That'd be aggression. This is males and females, female, male, very small difference in terms of aggression. Until you deal with the criminals, because they're super aggressive, and that's why we have so many men in prison versus women, right? And so you get to start to see, in this case, we're talking IQ, but also some of those other differences. That's how we pull that stuff out. That's methods. Figured I'd point that out since they start dealing with the intelligence stuff. And whenever we deal with IQ, you have to start here, because that's what people need to realize, is that, you know, this curve and its impact. Just you being here means you're already off of the side. How far over, who knows? But you'll never have to deal with the difficulties that have to go. And that's a bad one. It's a really bad one to deal with. Let's see, we are at 148. Let's see, talked about IQ, psychopathic, antisocial, personality disorders, mental disorders, DSM, the big five. Cognitive theories, social learning theories, psychodynamic theories, attachment theories. Theories abound. You feel like this has been a productive day? I sure hope you do. If you can, sound off. With that, that's all I have for you today. What we'll do next class is, we'll start on the next chapter. Should have time between now and then to sit down with, what was the first written thing in this class, to sit down and see how those are shaping up for you and start sending you sources. Because what I'll do is, as you move into certain topics, some of those I'll look up and see what I find, and sometimes I'll find some good ones. Or at minimum, what I'll do is I'll kind of key into the theories that align best with your areas of interest and have you start delving into that, because that's different than reading the textbooks. You'll see that as soon as I start sending you stuff. With that, if you have any questions, let me know. And guess we're done for today. Does that sound like fun?
Thanks, Dr. Hurst. Take care.
Yeah, my pleasure. You guys have a great one, and I'll see you on Wednesday. Bye.